أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين. نصلي عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى يا رب العالمين. أوصيكم نفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل كما جاء في محكم التنزيل. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. So we begin seeking the protection and the favor and the blessing of Allah from all of the corruption and the evil of the world, and for the fulfillment of the purpose for which He created us. Praise and gratitude is a lifestyle. It's not just something we say. It's something that should be reflected in our actions, how we deal with the world, how we promote Islam in our lives as an example. You see, the Prophet ﷺ was a miraculous person to walk this earth, and anyone who studies his life and his character and how he affected people will not come to any other conclusion except for that he was not a normal person. He had to have been who he claimed to be. And one thing that I wanted to talk about today is the idea of revenge. The world in its history is filled with people who took revenge. That is, in families, in business disputes, in neighborhood disputes, business colleagues. And of course, there is no shortage of reference of disastrous, disgusting revenge taking place by heads of state and leaders of empires and authority. And we here in the United States are no stranger to that. So when Pearl Harbor happened back in the 1941, in the World War II, when the Japanese bombed Hawaii, there was some losses and some destruction, mostly of the military installments, being it was in a war. And so the United States government was filled with the idea that we have to revenge. And so Hiroshima and Nagasaki are a part of world history that we don't want to address as Americans too often. To honestly address what took place when 2 bombs were loaded up in 2 planes and dropped on 2 cities, and immediately over 150,000 men, women, and children were disintegrated by the atomic bombs. There was no other time in world history in which such a grave, disgraceful attack on humanity took place. Such an oppressive act of revenge, of just belligerent revenge, holding whole villages accountable to something that military people made the decision. So in Islam we do not have revenge. It's not an Islamic behavior, it's sinful behavior. We have 2 concepts that are the fundamental basis for a healthy society. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. Allah is commanding to justice, to fairness and equity, and responding to something in a reasonable manner that is of similar proportion. But then God tells us to take it the next step if we find it in our hearts to be that altruistic, ihsan, to choose to go further than just simply giving somebody their rights or being just, but even going further and giving them more than they deserve, just because we are the servants of the merciful. And that is how that manifests. So the Prophet ﷺ and his companions left Medina because he had a dream that they would go make their Umrah for a pilgrimage. So 1,500 Muslim men left Medina. And they are in their ihram, just 2 white garments. And they go. And as they come to the outskirts, in a place called Hudaybiyah, they were surrounded by the Meccans. And they were put in a very tough situation. And we've talked about this event in sermons before, and I advise you to review it often, because there's so many lessons to be learned from this specific event. But bottom line is, the Prophet ﷺ was taking a big picture approach to the situation. He was not being rigid on his plan that was in his mind. He was being wise in the plan that he knows Allah is capable of. And so the Prophet ﷺ made many compromises. Many compromises. He didn't do kufr, he didn't do a sin, but he compromised what he knew to be the best thing to do, the right thing to do. And he did it in order to achieve peace. So he was, by the way, the Muslims were 1,500. Those that came to surround them were maybe 50, 60 on horses. They didn't have a battle in front of them. Some people say, well, they're in their ihram. Well, they did have swords with them just in case on the journey something happened. There could have been a battle. And they outnumbered the Quraysh. So don't misunderstand this event. Well, he had to compromise because they were, in ihram. No. If you're being attacked in ihram, you can fight back. But he did it because he just wanted peace. So he agreed, we won't even make the Umrah right now. And as a matter of fact, we'll send back the people who say they're coming to convert, we'll send them back. They are Meccans. We're going to suspend the hijrah for now. Which is a teaching in the Quran, by the way. So then, 2 years later, part of the agreement was that the tribes that are in allegiance or in alliance with each group, the Quraysh from Mecca, the polytheists, and the Muslims in Medina. So Bani Bakr was a group that is by Mecca, and they were aligned with the Meccan polytheists. And Bani Khuza'a, they were aligned with the Muslims. And so the tribe of Bakr had some dispute that they wanted to get the best of Khuza'a, and they started to attack them. And then Khuza'a thought, well, if we go into Mecca, because it's the sacred place, then they won't attack us. And then the Quraysh supported them, and over 20 of them were murdered from Khuza'a, who have allegiance. So they broke this treaty with the Prophet ﷺ the year after the Muslims have now come for their pilgrimage, as was in his dream. And so then Amr, one of the leaders amongst Khuza'a, he took a group and they went immediately to Medina, and they told the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ was visibly very upset. And so he basically resolved that that's it. They have broken this treaty. Through the last 2 years, there are many tribes who have embraced Islam. The Muslims were able to solve the problems that they had with the neighboring Jewish community who had aligned in the Ahzab a few years before that to try to destroy the Muslims after they had entered into a treaty with the Muslims. And so now the Muslims are a lot larger group. Actually, they had probably more than doubled in size in these 2 years. So the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed on it, and then he sent Umar and Abu Bakr and Ali to make private, specific requests to bring in these neighboring tribes to make a large army to go to Mecca. But he said, it is very important that you keep perfectly silent. And so they put, people in posts outside of Medina. And so when they did this, Abu Sufyan shows up, all by himself. And he's coming because he knows that they have broken the treaty. And so he tells the Prophet ﷺ, first actually before he goes to the Prophet ﷺ, he goes to his daughter, who is the Prophet ﷺ's wife, Habiba. And he went to go sit down, and she said, don't sit there. And she moved he said, daughter, why can't I sit there? Am I not good enough for your couch? She said, no, you are a polytheist. You are impure. I don't want you to sit on there because the Prophet sits on there and sleeps on there. He was blown away. He could not expect this from his daughter, the Anasim. By the way, Habiba, she went to Ethiopia early in this migration. And she became a Muslim very early. And then she married the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. And so she was not listening to anything Abu Sufyan had to say. She said, look, you guys broke the treaty. You guys are corrupt. You guys are evil. There will be a final battle. And so he went to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I have no interest in talking with you. He tried to deny that he knew about what happened. And the Prophet ﷺ said, now you're lying. You are so untrustworthy. I don't want to have any discussion. So then he went to Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was very clear. Umar was very clear. Then he went to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib said, look, I don't know what to tell you. This is our leader. And he knows what's right, and he gets revelations from heaven. We are not going to compromise or even begin to discuss with him when he has set on something. And so then Abu Sufyan goes out and declares to the people of Medina, look, I'm calling for peace. I want there to be peace. I would expect and hope nobody would breach this treaty. So then as he was leaving, the Prophet ﷺ came out and he said, you have said that from your own, as per no discussion between us and no agreement between us. You are leaving here having broken the treaty. Now, while that was going on, there was a guy named Hatib ibn Balta'a. And Hatib, he is from a family who are not Quraysh, but he was in Mecca. He was concerned looking at this army that is being built, that maybe, his family will be killed. So he sent a message with a lady, a slave woman. He said, I'm paying you to go take this message to the people of Quraysh and tell them, you better be ready, there's a big army coming. Now Hatib is from the people who were in Badr and Uhud and everything. He's a very senior Muslim. He's a very pious man. But his love for his family and his weakness of that overcame him, and so he sent this. So then the Prophet ﷺ was visited by the angel Gabriel. And the angel Gabriel said, you need to send somebody to a place called Markhakh, because there will be a woman there, and she will have with her a letter to the Quraysh informing them of this. So he told Ali and Zubayr, he said, you need to go to this place, you will find a woman there, and she'll be by herself, slave woman, and then you will tell her, give me the message. And they said, okay. So they went. They found this woman there, and they said, give me the message. She said, I don't have a message. They said, the Prophet ﷺ has told us you have a message. If you don't, then we will have to search you. We'll have to remove your stuff and find out where it is. So she pulled open her thing and she gave it to them. And so then, by the way, they did nothing to this woman. She's a paid slave. You know, she has to do whatever you would assume. So then they came back with Hatib. And Umar said, this is a munafiq, he should die. This is capital punishment. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Hatib, what has happened to you? Hatib said, you know I'm not from Quraysh. My family is there. I have a wife and kids that never migrated. They're there. I want them to be safe. I want to have them in a safe. That was part of my message. You see. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Hatib has said something true. And the message confirms this. And so maybe Allah looked at the people of Badr and said, you are forgiven for what happens here on out. Umar was very saddened by this, and he felt very bad because he was good to try to bring some capital punishment on Hatib. And he said, you are the Prophet ﷺ, you know best. And they let Hatib go. So the Prophet ﷺ is in the mode where he's taking an army of 10,000 to Mecca, and this guy is a traitor trying to ruin the whole thing and create more turmoil. But then even in that situation, the Prophet ﷺ inclines to compassion and mercy, not revenge. This story is going to continue with the theme. Not like any other person or leader or ruler ever existed is what we'll see in the Prophet ﷺ. So then shortly thereafter, the Prophet ﷺ's cousins, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith, not Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith, the leader of the army, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith, and Abdullah ibn Umayyah, these are his cousins, and they were mockers of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, and they wrote lots of poetry calling him a fool and a madman and all of this, and those poems were being recited all over Arabia. And they came. And they said, is there any way you will accept us? And they brought their children. Will you accept us as migrants? To migrate. And the Prophet ﷺ at first said, no. After all you have done, your situation is with Allah. That's how he first responded. So then they stayed. And they went to Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. And Ali is a great scholar. And he said, maybe if you go to the Prophet ﷺ and you say, لَقَدْ آثَرَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَإِنَّا كُنَّا لَخَاطِئِينَ. If you go, because they're family, to the Prophet ﷺ, and you say, Allah has truly preferred and blessed you above and over us, and we have surely been sinners and wrongdoers. The ayah from Surah Yusuf, when Joseph, after he became the figurehead of the treasury and all of that in Egypt, and then his brothers come, and that's what they said to him. And so you know what the Prophet ﷺ is going to respond. He smiles with قَالَ لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمَ يَغْفِرُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. The Prophet ﷺ responded as Ali would have expected, and then he accepted them and forgave them for everything they had done. Then Abbas comes. And Abbas, according to many narrations, was a spy in Mecca the whole time, from the early time. And he was sending messages to the Prophet ﷺ about what's going on in the Quraysh. So as they get to a place called Marr al-Zahran outside of Mecca, Abbas, according to the narration, this is interesting, he didn't ask the Prophet ﷺ's permission. He did on his own. He went into Mecca and then got Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harb. Because he felt like if this guy becomes Muslim, that will make this whole process a lot more smooth. According to the narrations, and I looked at many of them, it appears as though Abbas really did make this ijtihad on his own. Which is, some people say, well, this is like this other guy, he's being munafiq. But no, he's bringing him just by himself in the night. He brought Abbas with two of his cousins. And he came. And the Prophet ﷺ said on that night, he said, because before he left Medina to go to Mecca, he prayed that Allah would not allow the Meccans to know and that He would take them by surprise. And then on the night before they go in, this night that Abbas goes to bring Abu Sufyan, he told the whole army, 10,000, everybody light up a fire. And the commentators said, at this point, it all makes sense in that the Prophet ﷺ, the reason why he's praying that they would not know of his coming with this big army and that they would be taken by surprise, and then now why he is asking them to light this big giant campfire of 10,000 people strong is so that they would look now that it's right outside and know there's no way they could win this battle, so that there would not have to be a battle. And Abbas is thinking in the same terms. So Abbas brings Sufyan ibn al-Harb, and as they go by, everybody sees Abbas and they're fine. But then Umar sees Abbas and other two, and he says, who is with you, Abbas? And he says, this is Sufyan ibn al-Harb. And he said, Allah has blessed us with the opportunity to kill Abu Sufyan, because now we have no treaty, and here we are coming for a war. And here he is all by himself with no peace treaty and no actual meeting of the foes. So Abbas said, I am giving him my own personal, and Umar said, who are you to give him any personal anything? Did the Prophet ﷺ say, Abbas still doesn't get that stuff yet. Abbas is still culturally a tribal Arab, even though he's a believer, and has probably been a believer for many years. But if you don't live among the believers, and you don't grow in knowledge and fellowship with the believers, you will be highly affected for who you're surrounded around. Right? No matter how much you say you believe, no matter how much you can talk La ilaha illallah. It's something that requires a jama'ah. So then, Abu Sufyan, Abbas said, look, give me a break here. So he took him to the Prophet ﷺ, and Sufyan is telling him, look, it's amazing to watch how everybody here is following you. I don't even know who these people are. Are these people from Medina? He said, no, these are people from many other. He said, how did you get them? He said, they're all Muslim, of course. He said, wow. Abu Sufyan's in awe of how the people, and he remembers when he was in Medina, how his own daughter and how the people talked. Because in the tribal anarchy of Mecca, there wasn't an official leader who everybody they didn't ever have kings. Everybody were nobles, and the noble with the most cleverest ideas or the most money would empower themselves, and people would challenge them, no problem. They didn't see them as above. It was a noble system. So but now there's one person who everybody is fully devout to. And so they talked, and Abbas then said, let's give him a couple of days to sit with us, and with him here, they will not do anything in Mecca. So the Prophet ﷺ took Abbas's opinion. And so in the morning, Abu Sufyan saw them all making wudu. He's seeing all this wudu. He said, what is happening now? Did you wash your hands before you kill everyone? That's what he thought. He didn't know what's going on. So then Abbas explained to them what the wudu was. And then they went up to the Prophet ﷺ, and again Umar is watching him from the whole way. Umar is right behind Abu Sufyan every step of the way. He's not letting him go anywhere without any openness. And so then he said, well, they said, well, they were making ablution. Then they all prayed, and Abu Sufyan is looking at this prayer. He's never seen something like that. This huge prayer happened. And actually, there's a narration that's authentic that when the Prophet was making wudu, some of the companions taking this wudu and then they're wiping it on themselves like that from the wudu that came from him. And so he said, Abbas, I've never heard of any king. I have visited Byzantine and Persia. I've never seen any king. He said he's not a king. And that's what Omar said. Omar told him, he said, look, you think that you're here providing him some sort of cultural protection. And then he took, because he told Omar, Abbas, he said, if this was somebody from your tribe, you would have no problem. He said, I don't care whose tribe it was from. He said, when you became Muslim, I was more happy than if my own father would have become Muslim. And that has nothing to do with any tribe, because I know the Prophet would be happier that you became Muslim than if my father became Muslim. We are all loving the Prophet ﷺ because he was sent by Allah to us. And we know this. So, Abu Sufyan is standing there, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Abu Sufyan, when will you just admit that there is no deity and nothing will they worship except for God alone? He said, if I really did believe in those idols, they would have done something for me in these last 23 years. Surely they're not having any problem. He said, will you not then admit that I am the messenger of God? He said, you're a great person, but that's one I'm having a hard time with. Now some people might say, well, but look, Abu Sufyan has more than one family member who has traveled and went through very difficult circumstances to become Muslim. And so many people did. But see, Abu Sufyan, his thought process is that there is a precedence of honor and nobility. And God would not choose an orphan boy. If he was going to choose somebody, he'd choose me or Abu Jahl or Abu Lahab or one of these. Not this guy. No matter how nice he is. But he didn't realize the concept of character. And so the more he watches the character of the Muslims and the character of the Prophet, he starts seeing the currency of spiritual value in the character of the believers. And it's not about what your lineage is, how much money you have. So then he told the Prophet ﷺ, because Abbas said, look, if you don't become Muslim now, I'm telling you right now, you're on the wrong side of the thing here. You'll be killed. And he said, look, I embrace it. So he embraced Islam. So Prophet ﷺ, next day, he said, 4 battalions go on each side of Mecca. He said, there is to be no fighting and no attacking except if somebody attacks you. And he told Abu Sufyan on his way in, because Abbas said, Abu Sufyan is a person of nobility, he wants to feel special. He said, okay, go. Many people don't know this part of the story. He said, go tell them that the Prophet has said anyone in the house of Abu Sufyan is safe. So it's like he's the special guy of the whole city, right? But then when he comes, and then he tells them, they said, we can't all fit in your house. So then Abbas said, anybody who goes to the Kaaba is safe. And so then when the Prophet ﷺ comes close, they said, we can't fit in the Kaaba. He said, if you go in your homes and lock your doors, we are coming in. We will not come touch your house. So everybody went in their home and they were sufficient. Unfortunately, on the south side, where Khalid ibn Walid was, there was a small skirmish. 20 polytheists and 2 Muslims were killed. And then the Prophet ﷺ had a list of people who had committed grave crimes. 2/3 of those he forgave them. Particularly when somebody or they came and said, look, please forgive me. And the Prophet kept forgiving and forgiving. So then the Prophet came and he makes his tawaf. First thing he does, go in there, he hits his cane on the black stone, Allahu Akbar. He screams it. Everybody says Allahu Akbar behind him, they make tawaf. While he's making tawaf, there's a guy named Fudala ibn Umayr. He says, look, I know what's going to happen, but I have to kill this man, because this is the revenge. And he said that to himself. I will take revenge for what's happening here. And so Fudala goes and tries to make his way towards the Prophet ﷺ, right towards the end of the tawaf, and the Prophet ﷺ turned right around in his face, and he put his hand on his chest, he said, Fudala. And Fudala was like, what? How do you know me? And he says, what were you thinking to do right now? He said, I'm making tawaf, I was remembering Allah. So then the Prophet ﷺ says, he smiled at him and he said, Astaghfirillah. Seek his forgiveness. And then he said, and then the Prophet took his hand off of my chest, and he said, in that moment, I knew he was the Prophet, and there was no one more beloved to me on this earth than this man, and I had come to kill him. And there's many examples like this, and we're running out of time, so I will try to get to the final point here. So Uthman bin Talha is not Muslim yet, but he is the one of Quraysh who is responsible for the Kaaba. So after the Prophet ﷺ finished his tawaf, he prays his 2 rak'ahs. He says, who is the one who has the keys to the Kaaba? So then Ali ibn Abi Talib said, it's Uthman bin Talha. He went to him. He said, give me the keys to the Kaaba. The Prophet ﷺ, He gets the keys, he goes in there, and then he removes all of the idols. And they start to destroy all the idols. And he said, look, this is the place of Abraham, only God alone will be worshipped here, nothing beside him. And so all of the idols, and then the Prophet went in there and prayed 2 rak'ahs. And then he came out, and then Ali ibn Abi Talib said, can I keep this key? He said, no, you cannot keep this key. He said, this is the day of honesty and wafa and birr and righteousness and sidq and all of that. You give it back to the one who it is, he will be responsible. And so they went back to Uthman ibn Talha, and Uthman ibn Talha said, you're going to give it back to me? He said, yes. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said, today is the day of honesty and fulfillment of rights and trust. And so he took his shahada right there. This is what we're learning, is how Islam really actually grows. It always was like that. Muslims have to defend. You have to defend. Someone trying to kill you, you have to defend yourself. Somebody's invading you, you have to defend yourself. Nobody would deny that. But if you look and study the whole history of Islam, people actually embracing Islam, and what happened to them when they changed their life dramatically, it was because of character. It was because of altruism and benevolence and honesty and genuineness and forgiveness and trustworthiness. All of those is what impressed upon people. So the Prophet ﷺ, according to a narration, then when he finishes that, he reads Surah Al-Hujurat, just the ayah, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, O people, I've created you all from male and female and made you into different tribes and nations so that you will come to know one another. The best among you in the sight of Allah is the most pious, and He is the one who knows and is aware of who has that right. So now he destroyed tribalism and idol worship. So what was the battle about? It was some idol worshippers and their tribalism trying to stop. And when I say battle, I'm talking about the whole 23 years of the Prophet's life. I'm talking about this day. This is the culmination of the whole story. Polytheists who are tribalists are saying, you Muslims have no right to be Muslim here. We will mock, ridicule, abuse, humiliate, and torture, and kill you, and fight against you until you come back to our way. And these people are saying, no, this is the Prophet, this is the revelation, we have every right to be who we are. And this is the part that really blew my mind when I did this research, because I've never read this before, I read it today. After that day, the Prophet ﷺ told the people, the Muslims, to go integrate, back to my point that I keep making up, get to know all of the people you haven't seen in a while. Now that we have peace, we're not here to kill anybody, we're here to remove the idols, restore it back to its Abrahamic roots, and to tell people tribalism means nothing anymore. You're a human soul with character, accountable as such in this life and the hereafter. That's your value. It's completely changed everything in one day. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so then he went and he said, everybody meet me at the hill of Safa. This part blew my mind. I had never read this before. He said, come to me at Safa, and in the next, they stayed there, this was in Ramadan, they stayed there 18, 19 days. And over the next few days, people came to Safa all to announce their belief on their own. Nobody said, he said, whoever wants to become Muslim, he told the Muslims, go make da'wah, go explain what is this about, what is the ayahs, explain to them the ayahs, tell them what we've been through, what we do, who we are, what we're about. And then people came in droves. يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. They came in droves on the same hill 23 years before when he announced himself and they said, you're a liar, you are crazy, what the heck is this nonsense? And they all went away, and thus began the turmoil. And the turmoil is now ended with people all realizing who this man was, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I need some people are trying to make it their way. If you could please scoot up and scoot over, that would be great. So the Prophet ﷺ was not about revenge. Raise your hand if you know who Richard McKinney is. Okay? Pay attention. Richard McKinney is a Marine vet who has been overseas in these wars that our government has started in the Muslim world, unfortunately. And he grew a hatred for Muslims. And so then he devised a plot to go blow up a mosque. And the FBI caught him before he did it. And he had visited to scope out the mosque. And they gave him some material. And then after he was going through all this, he started to look into it. And then he came back to the mosque after some time, and he started asking questions. And the people were welcoming. They were like, "You're that guy. You're trying to blow us up." Richard McKinney is making tours across the country. He has converted to Islam. People just can know about it. And they know about it right, they will see the beauty of this message. Because it's built into their heart. All of creation surrounding them is thriving on the will of God, the submission to the will of God. Everything in existence is functioning on that. The more you think about it in your own moral decision-making process, the more it will make sense. The more you pay attention to the structure of Islam. Even if you just break down the adhan. I was going to do that. We skipped Bilal. Most of you have heard that. But even if you just think about what that's saying and what that means, and why they're in that order, it will help you to see that it's a system. It's not an affiliation. It's a system of reality. I ask Allah to enrich upon us the means to carry this message. Ya Allah, remove from our hearts any hatred or vengefulness. Put in our hearts compassion and benevolence and altruism. Help us to become those who shine the light of Islam, following the example of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. Ya Allah, forgive us for our sins. Forgive us for our laziness. Forgive us for our ignorance. Forgive us of our arrogance. Give us the humility and the wisdom needed to properly present this message to the world around us. Ya Allah, we ask you to send your peace and blessings and mercy upon your Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and all of those who follow him until the day of judgment.